monthly dialogues in Saudi Arabia, where we take a deep dive during these conversations and look into how the kingdom is shaping its policy, how consumers, individuals, businesses, and government are shaping their policies towards their net zero goals that they have set. And today we'll be zeroing in on the topic of unlocking the potential of carbon markets, which of course is a very dynamic field now, but admittedly has a long way to go. And I'm delighted to be joined by 4 guests today to give us their point of view on how carbon markets are progressing. Mr. Mustafa Al-Shahri, Executive Director of Sustainability for the Middle East at SABIC. Fadi Al-Shihabi, Partner and Head of Sustainability for the Middle East at KPMG. Dr. Yusuf Al-Shamari, Honorary Senior Research Fellow at Imperial College London and a former Research Fellow at OPEC, and also CEO and Head of Oil Research at Sea Markets. And Fuad Al-Zayer, Independent Energy Consultant, and he's the former Head of the Data Services Division at OPEC as well. So thank you everybody very much for joining us. And as I mentioned, the topic of our conversation today will be about unlocking the potential of carbon markets. Gentlemen, I'd like to start by perhaps putting a question to each, the same question to each of you, just to get us going, bigger picture. You know, obviously we're here in the Gulf, in an heavily energy producing region. The region, including Egypt, of course, and not just the Gulf, will be hosting, you know, the next two COP meetings, COP27 and COP28. The subject of, you know, a global carbon price and carbon markets has clearly made some progress since the challenge, if you like, was set to countries in the Paris COP round. But many argue that it hasn't advanced quickly enough. And today I hope we're going to get some answers and points of view as to why not, and, you know, what are the next steps that should be taken so we can advance that forward. So let's talk a bit about the main challenges to unlocking the potential of the energy markets. Mustafa, let me go with you. First, you are heading sustainability at one of Saudi Arabia's largest industrial firms. How close are we to setting a carbon pricing market or mechanism on a global scale?
Well, first of all, thank you for hosting me. I think this is a key challenge to have a unified carbon price globally. As a global company, we are operating in different regions, different parts of the world, and we try to cope with this regulation and making sure that our business are sustainable in the longer future. We are witnessing also that different regions have different speeds. For example, in Europe, I think they are leading on this agenda. America is on depending on the leadership there, but still we see certain progress there. Asia is following certain development in the Middle East, where we consider Saudi Arabia is our home market. But due to the size of the issue, I think the solution must be embraced by different stakeholders, not only the governments, but also the NGOs, the customers, everybody, the private sector also. So we are trying to cope with these developments on the global scale, and we try to adjust and making sure that our business stay sustainable on the longer term. We, being as a national champion in Saudi Arabia and the petrochemical business, we see that we belong to one of the hard to abate sectors. Our industry is very complex, to be honest with you. But again, we try to be around. We try to be in the discussion table around this, and hopefully that going forward, I think things will start to merge together. But I don't think we're going to see a global unified carbon price in this one future.
Okay, thank you very much, Mustafa. And we'll talk a bit more about that sort of national versus international system. Fadi, if I can go to you, Fadi from KPMG, carbon markets are still quite fragmented, and perhaps not one size fits all. That makes sense. And a lot of these GHG emissions are not even covered yet, by regulated carbon pricing mechanisms today. That's a lot which is still not covered. What is the main challenge of unlocking the potential of this in your point of view?
Yeah, thank you again for hosting me, and I'm very happy to be today with you all. In fact, when we look at the captured emissions in the market, we can see it's only maybe around 20-25% from the global greenhouse gas emissions. What we have lack in is policies. We don't have unified policies across the globe. In the past, we used to rely on the Kyoto Protocol, where we had a framework or agreement under the United Nations with different mechanisms, CDM, joint implementation, and ETS. So it was more regulated, but unfortunately, due to some geopolitical situations, did not achieve the target and get to be continued. Nowadays, with the net zero carbon, we can see that there is more flexibility in implementing the greenhouse gases reduction protocols, as well as we have now longer time. We also rely on technology as well. Energy transition is an important topic where it will support oil and gas producers and other consumers actually to become more greener and with less emissions. We can see now there is the green hydrogen, there is the green ammonia, blue hydrogen. Renewable energy is now much cheaper than in the past. So we can see that R&D technologies would play a great role supporting the communities, governments to achieve their targets. But internationally or globally, we don't have a unified framework where it is needed, actually. It is needed to organize and regulate the global, emission trading schemes. So this is like a brief.
Okay, thanks, Fadi. Fuad, if I can go to you and just ask you a bit about the pricing of carbon. I mean, we've seen it increase quite a bit in the last year or two. It's a progression, obviously. But do price levels need to, in your opinion, increase dramatically quickly for people to start taking this more seriously, for industry to start implementing voluntary, even whether it's we're talking about voluntary carbon trading mechanisms and initiatives? Where are we on this price scale and speed at which that's moving?
Good afternoon, all, and thank you, Diala, for Energy Intelligence and Microsoft to invite me. And I see an old colleague here, Yusuf, is with us. So hello, Yusuf. Definitely, there has to be a motive for companies to come on board. Pricing is one of the conditions. Without the appropriate pricing, you will not be able to have companies to come on board, to be encouraged. The whole idea of carbon market is really to accelerate the energy transition. Energy transition is happening. I can talk about my country, Saudi Arabia, where we are taking this very seriously. We are going very pro hydrogen. We are building the largest hydrogen plant in the world in NEOM. We are moving toward EV, electrical vehicles. We are partnered with Lucent to build 150 electrical vehicles a year, made in Saudi Arabia. So we're doing a lot of things as far as energy transition. But you need a motive. You need some other encouraging factors to make it happen sooner and faster. And definitely, carbon market is the way to go. I was very happy and pleased to know that PIF have launched or announced the launching of voluntary carbon market a few months ago, and with a few, some of the highest emitters of carbon, Saudi Arabia, coming on board voluntarily. Aramco is one of them. I'm not sure SABIC is there yet, but I know ACWA Power is there, NEOM is there, and others. So I think there has to be some motivation for companies to come on board. Pricing is one of the conditions. You need regulatory. And I think the voluntary, I'm a big believer in the voluntary carbon market as one of the encouraging factors to go forward.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Yusuf, welcome again. I mean, I have just a couple of figures here I'd like to throw out. I hope they're accurate. The global compliance market for carbon credits, is obviously growing exponentially. It still has a long way to go. Refinitiv has a figure that there was $261 billion worth of carbon credits traded in 2020. And the demand for credits could increase 100-fold, in the next 25, 30 years. So, Dr. Youssef, I mean, that's great potential, but how do we scale up? What are the next steps? What to you is the next 1 or 2 critical steps where we can scale up? We've talked about price a little bit of carbon. Anything else?
First, thank you very much for having me. Well, I've heard amazing insights from my colleagues here, and essentially what I can add to that. First, I just would like to highlight important points being made by Mr. Fuad on the recent developments in carbon markets in the kingdom, and I think that the kingdom has a strong direction towards the clean energy agenda, especially under the Vision of 2030. Now, looking at the figures that you've just informed me, 2020 actually was the year of COVID-19, so the world was in recession. And carbon prices were actually at their lowest level ever. Just look at carbon prices now in Europe. They are close to 80 euros per ton. In fact, it could be even more. And of course, because of the huge demand now for fossil fuels compared to the stage before. And of course, the Russian-Ukraine crisis is also playing an important role in here. Now, to scale up, I think it is not just about regulations and policy, but also technology. For example, I like the important points made by Sabiq, my friend here, Mr. Mustafa, and he said that there is complexity in the operation, and I absolutely agree on that, because no company would make these investments until there is a value of having an economic returns. And I believe it isn't just about regulations, it's also about technology, and technologies aren't fully ready yet, especially when it comes to CO2 conversion. There is an important program led by the Ministry of Energy, which is Circular Carbon Economy, very ambitious program, which is also in line and also that complements the sustainable oil program. Both actually complement one another. And for these programs to work, and actually for investors to pour money into, let's say, carbon markets and CO2 utilization technologies, we need to have actually to invest more in R&D. And I believe companies like Sabiq, Aramco have a pivotal role to play, because they're where this is the operation. There's where actually the workshop where such technologies will be implemented. So I believe, number one, we need to invest in R&D within the next 10 years to achieve net zero. Technologies aren't fully ready yet in terms of the economics. And number two, there needs to be the right framework in terms of the regulations and, of course, investments. Of course, here you need to work with projects have to be bankable and profit making. So this is, I think, just a roadmap to scale up within the next 10 years.
Right. You mentioned that Saudi adopted the circular carbon economy when it was hosting the G20 a couple of years ago, and actually presented that as a challenge for others to adopt. Are you aware how well that's been taken on, with Saudi having sort of given that to the G20 to embed in their own economies, in their own countries? How much of a push did that give them?
Your question again, the
investments being made. The circular carbon economy, the whole thing about the circularity of it, and Saudi Arabia is the one who's launched it as their own adoption, if you like, and presented it at the G20 meeting.
Yes. Well, it's a very ambitious program by the Ministry of Energy, but by the way, the idea is not new, but it's being very much activated by Saudi Arabia and brought into policymakers' attention during the G20. But if you go back in the between 2005, in fact, even 2010, research on circular carbon started in the UK. Certainly, the ambitions it didn't reach to the high-level policy agenda until the G20 in 2020, when it was, of course, laid down by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And I guess it is also a part of the clean development agenda coming in NEOM, the Red Sea, the Liner, and all these clean development projects. Just NEOM is planning to be the first city without any carbon emissions, so net zero carbon city, the first in the world. So, and I believe Saudi Arabia is making amazing investments in that direction. Just the research targets that Aramco is already making. Saudi Arabia is planning to become the world's largest supplier of blue hydrogen by 2030, with the production reaching 4 million ton per annum. That's from that with recent discoveries, especially with the Jafurah gas field. So, in fact, after supplying all the gas demand in Saudi Arabia from Al Jafurah, the remaining part will be converted to blue hydrogen. That is with carbon capture. So, what we're going to do with the carbon capture? I guess it will be either perhaps sequestered as a first option, because sequestration is now the most economic use. But I believe also converting it to alternative products will also be on the agenda.
Please,
add something, Diala.
Yes,
yeah,
of course.
Back to the circular carbon economy, I support what Yusuf just said, that it's a term that has been around for a few years, but Saudi Arabia led that in the T20, and they added something. It was called reuse, reduce, and recycle. And what was added to it is remove. So remove carbon is key. Remove carbon is through technology like CCUS is an important element if we're really going to accomplish the goals of the carbon economy. Saudi Arabia is leading a lot of these projects that Yusuf mentioned, but there needs to be an international cooperation to make this scalable to a big size. We need cooperation between the producers and the consumers together, the technologies. So, and I mean, it's nice to invest in renewables, and we see a lot of move toward that, but some of the investment and research has to go into coming up with better CCUS technologies that can be applied and scaled to the level we would like. Because fossil fuel are going to be around with us for a while, and we need to find a way to coexist with that. And CCUS definitely under the circular carbon economy is key in this direction.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fossil fuels aren't going anywhere. Mustafa, yes, go ahead. I'm just going to come to you on the circularity question, Mustafa. Please go ahead. Perhaps you're going to answer.
I mean, I just want to add that even if we look at SABIC as the second largest petrochemical company nowadays, SABIC was established pure on sustainability agenda. And in 1976, when Saudi Arabia didn't have the master gas system, the decision was made to build that system. The whole SABIC nowadays is built on that concept. So basically, we collected that gas, we treat it, we put it as a feedstock for our company, and now we have almost 30,000 employees globally with 19 research centers. SABIC also have started the largest CO2 plant in Jubail area with the capacity to purify up to 500,000 tons. So basically, the agenda of sustainability been started in Saudi Arabia a long time ago, but as mentioned by my colleagues here, I think the policy has to be there with the right technologies, because I honestly don't think, if you look at the time frame that the certain countries committed to be carbon neutral by 2060 or even 2050, I know for sure that the technologies nowadays are not there, but down the road, I think this is the responsibility of these companies, this government, to create and come up and make sure that these technologies are feasible.
Yeah, I mean, Mustafa, just staying with you, we often have conversations around the whole question of energy transition, and many argue that, well, the technology is there, it's being invested in, it's moving forward, but policy is often lagging behind. Clarity on regulations for investors, for even big national companies who want to move forward with certain plans and huge investments towards circularity, etc., efficiencies. Do you think there's enough clarity from policy at the moment in Saudi or elsewhere for those massive investments to be committed to? And secondly, Mustafa, just another part of that question on the other side of it, are companies and industries now fully aware, would you say, of the economic bottom line benefits of taking these measures, or is there still some hesitancy?
Actually, I just wanted also, there is a crucial element, which is oil prices. When oil prices are up, it gives us a great, opportunity to invest in R&D and, to afford other, expenses. For example, now we understand that oil prices, when it is like above 60 or 70 or 80 dollars per barrel, it supports more renewable energy. It supports more, low carbon solutions. For example, green hydrogen and blue hydrogen. Those technologies are get very active when we see oil prices above 50. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and in the region in general, we see determination from governments to get the carbon emissions and to get the net zero approach seriously. We can see Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they established the platform, the voluntary market, in collaboration between BIF, Saudi Airlines, MENA, and others. So it is not, to make profit, it's to activate the market, to have a regional platform, and, to become like a role model to others to join them. We can see UAE also, they are also trying to build a platform within the UAE. So it is another, opportunity. So it is not very much, related to the carbon prices. It supports, of course, but it is not, to improve the visibility of projects. It's like more to become more responsible from products. And we started to hear more about, the removal, which is scope 4 now. We know that there is scope 1, 2, and 3 approved by the GHG protocol. We started to hearing about scope 4, which is also another good term now to highlight and to present to people about the reduction or removal. So it's, all in all, I think, the region here is now more responsible. I can see we have good contribution globally. We started to become a role model to other companies, especially when it comes to the oil and gas. We know Saudi Aramco, they have, a great efforts now in the green economy. As well as we see Total, they changed their brand now, Total Energies. So they are contributing also to that. So Saudi Aramco now, they have great achievements. When we look at, they already published their carbon footprint, their upstream carbon intensity, which is around 10.7 kilogram per barrel oil, which is one of the greatest, numbers globally. So if we continue, maintaining these low carbon emissions, as well as supporting more the green economy and energy transition, I believe the region here will be a role model in energy transition. And I don't see it is impossible to hit the net zero carbon goal by 2050 or 2060.
2050. Dr. Youssef, let me just go to you on the technology question again, and just talk to you a bit about open innovation. There's a lot of advancements being made in technology. Some of it is shared and cooperative efforts on that front. How important is it that on a regional scale, but also globally, that stakeholders learn to share innovation, not replicate, not waste their time? How much open innovation do we have? And again, it's part of this sort of shift, isn't it? Mindset shift of where we're trying to head to.
Okay, so most innovation actually being done at university research centers. For example, in Saudi Arabia, you would see CALS taking a key role in that. And of course, here companies like Aramco and SABIC will also having some amazing initiatives. I know that SABIC has already converted carbon into urea. They have an excellent pilot scale project that could save 500,000 ton of carbon annually. Maybe Mustafa can correct me if I am wrong, but that's as far as I know. So into urea, into fertilizers. Also, Saudi Aramco has got interesting pilot scale carbon sequestration projects in Uthmaniyah. So there is interesting research being done. A lot also is being done abroad, and technology and research centers that owned by both companies, and whether in in France, in the US, that also in China. Also, universities have got an important role. For example, subsidizing research projects at leading universities around the world, starting from MIT to Imperial, and certain leading places. So, but one thing here that I'm worried about isn't just about investing in research, but also the politics, because we're seeing different policies made by various countries that can selectively choose which technologies do we need to invest in. And ultimately, what does that lead to? You would see certain technologies where funding goes to, okay, like EVs, for example, and potential technologies that can also have a leading role to play being less subsidized or actually invested in, that can lead to a, let's say, a better progress of developments. And I think this is a very risk to that's something that we really need to be worried about as we move to achieve our net zero carbon and targets, while treating all technologies that will be governed by innovation and the markets, not by selective policies. So I think one important thing here that I have to highlight is we do need conventional transport fuels. So if we're going just to subsidize electric vehicles or EVs, let's say electrification, then mining the quantities that we need to do will be enormous. And here there needs to be investments into conventional chemical fuels. So that's why I think there needs to be more investments going into that sort of innovation and production and storage.
Especially for heavy transport, if you're talking about heavy transportation, and hence the big initiatives going into hydrogen in the region. Mustafa, just back to you on not just the innovation, but the cultural shift, if you like, mindset shift towards sustainability. I mean, we're talking about industries now and energy companies and the carbon emitters, and of course, not just the energy sector, which emits carbon. Let's not forget that. But talk to me a bit about, from a human resources point of view, the cultural shift even within SABIC, within your own company. Has that message been received loud and clear, if you like, in terms of what the opportunity cost might be, or the fact that this is businesses now, their first thing in their strategy should be sustainability and then everything else? Is that something, you talked a bit about SABIC already, but do you think that is permeating throughout the sectors in Saudi, in the kingdom?
I truly believe, to be honest with you, when I started my career 20 years ago, I think the question that I would ask will be different from the generation nowadays. And I think in order to attract the talents for the future, leaders need to better articulate the purpose, in this case around the objective and commitment to the sustainable journey, and show commitment to supporting this action, not just words. Also, true engagement with the young talent is needed, to listen to their views, support them by removing institutional barriers, and as well to inspire them to action. I understand that today's generation are different, but oil and gas, petrochemical industries are cornerstones to have a better lives in the future. I mean, looking at the chemical industry, we have double role. Yes, we consume lots of fuel and feedstock in terms of gas, but also we provide lots of solutions to the mobility, to the agriculture, to every application around our life. So yes, I think it's a challenge, and also the nature of the question that we receive. I remember in one of our recruitment campaigns, we start to receive questions like, what are you doing for the environment? Or how many hours I can volunteer? Or what is your CSR strategy? What is your sustainability agenda? So these factors are translated into certain KPIs, certain actions in terms to make sure that our talent pipeline is always full.
Okay, great. And I'm going to go to Fadia and Fuad now. They had their hands up and a bit to comment a little bit on that change of mindset. Fuad, we'll go to you first. You had your hand up. Were you commenting on something earlier?
Yes, as Yusuf was talking about the technologies, the issue of hydrogen came to my mind. We are very much gung-ho in Saudi Arabia about hydrogen. We think hydrogen will be able to replace a lot of the oil that is being spent in desal plant and other heavy industries. But one technology that has to be that needs collaboration is the logistics of transporting hydrogen. Hydrogen is made that you can use it locally, closely, but to be able to transport it and export it is a challenge. I think Saudi Aramco and SABIC collaborated in a pilot project to change that to ammonia, and it was shipped to Japan, 40 tons, I think it's 2021. So there's a lot more needs to be done in that place. So that was my point when I raised my hand. But may I also back up what Mustafa mentioned regarding the sensitivity of employment these days. Young people, around the world feel fossil fuel. It could be dirty or chemical. So we need to. So companies like SABIC and Aramco need to do a lot more selling to the young generation. Hey, you can be part of the journey to make it better, to make it cleaner. So I think the carbon market is one way, to show sensitivity to the environment. And the second, of course, all the energy transition projects. So you have a company like Aramco. They have a whole division now, a whole business line about energy transition. So I think these are very important keys to be able to attract the young talent that is needed to make this happen in the future. That's what I was trying to say.
Thank you. Okay, Fadi, if I can go to you, I know you had your hand up. You can make a comment, but also I wanted to ask you about measurement, measurability. If you could get more into that across sectors. So please do give us your comments on what you wanted to join in earlier.
Sure, thank you. Well, first of all, I just wanted to add to what my colleague Mustafa mentioned earlier about the impact of the organizations. What we call it long-term value. So yes, indeed, there is some pollution coming from this organization, but what is the other impact that they are adding to society, to the environment as well? So we have, which is called long-term value and the net value of their operations. This is something actually, to be fair, assessing organizations is to reflect their long-term value. On the other side, we also, for example, when we have 1 ton CO2 emissions, we would like to track the achievements or the impact of this 1 ton CO2. What we have done with this 1 ton CO2? Did we only burn that as a fuel and that's it? Or we reduced, for example, polyethylene, that polyethylene was used in somewhere else, et cetera, et cetera. So the life cycle assessment from the other side of this 1 ton CO2 is very important to be tracked and to know the value of this. It's like when you make reduction in your emissions, is it coming from renewable energy or is it coming from reducing, your fossil fuel consumption? So again, the result is one thing. We have one unit to be expressed as ton of CO2 reduction, but the source or the purpose is very important to be also captured and monitored. Back to your question about how we can monitor and verify the GHG or the greenhouse gases. It's very important actually also while we are talking very positively about the greenhouse gases reduction, etc., to avoid what is called greenwashing. We need to be very realistic in our assessment. Monitoring and verification. That's why at the beginning we mentioned that we need some global or international framework. This will support all of us to follow the same criteria or the same protocol. We don't want to have different protocols here and there. Each one will use the easiest one for them or the easier solution. So again, we need to have proper MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification process. With the CDM or with the Kyoto Protocol, we had a clear mechanism in place. Now with the different markets between the voluntary and mandatory markets, we have different mechanisms. Again, we need to have this in a proper way. So we highly encourage the global communities through the COP27 and 28 maybe to identify the right mechanism to have proper MRV in place, regardless what is that, but at least to have unified system in place to support the business and to support the reduction happening.
And Fadi, just to follow up on that, and we're going to have to close up in a few minutes, I'm afraid. We've already run out of time. You mentioned COP27 and 28, and it's happening, as I mentioned earlier, in the region, both those meetings, one of them in the UAE and the other in Egypt, of course, this year. This year? Yes.
Yeah, in a few weeks. In a few weeks.
I'm getting my years on. COVID has given us all very, very lax date brain. What do you think that carbon price? I'll put this question to all of you. Should carbon pricing and carbon trading be at the top of the agenda for COP27, or is there something more important to really get the ball rolling more quickly?
Well, to come to the carbon pricing is one of the elements that will encourage, or will support the rest of stages in this, cycle. Definitely, as the team mentioned earlier, that yes, we need to have proper pricing in place to encourage the process. Yes, that's really needed. But at the same time, before going to this stage, we need to ensure that we have all the previous steps in place. We have proper projects, we have proper policies, we have proper MRV, we have proper framework and governance. Then we will have the price coming, by default, because we know the commitment in Europe. This will get reflected on the region as well, because now Europe started talking about Scope 3, which is mandatory to be reported and to be taxed later. So this will put pressure on their imports from outside Europe, which is our region. So again, we need to comply with the international regulations, as well as enhancing our economies to become more greener and to become more responsible.
Okay, Mustafa, your last word on that question of what should COP27, what should, many things to focus on, obviously, but where should the top priority lie?
I echo my colleagues here. To be honest with you, I don't think there is a silver bullet for the climate change or the challenges that brings with that. But I think as long as the level playing field is assured for the industry players, and to me, carbon pricing, by the way, is one of the tools. As long as we embed the LCA, the life cycle analysis, in our decisions, as long as we make sure that the national circumstances are taken into consideration, with the support of the right policy and the right financing, I'm sure that every region, every country will deliver at its own pace. Maybe in the Arab region, we might do it differently than Asia or in Europe. But yes, and the most important thing for me, at least, is to make sure that we don't have conflicting policies or conflicting decisions, because we have global players. For example, SABIC, we operate in most of the world, and the last thing we want to see is conflicting policies that will hinder our growth and our ambition moving forward.
Okay, well, thank you, Mustafa. I think we're going to we'll end on that very useful, insightful note of let's not let policies conflict, and let's work on advantages of technology overlap, etc. At the end of the day, this is a race really to get there as soon as possible, and clearly partnership and policy coalitions are very important. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the Microsoft Sustainability Dialogues in Saudi Arabia. We've run out of time very quickly, but we really value your insights today. Thank you so much for joining us.